Welcome back to Week 1 Picks. I'm Artem in the May, and I'm going to be breaking down the week number 9 card of the 10-week Dana White's Contender Series season. That is, of course, the 2024 season, and we're already there. We're already at the back end of the season, the last 2 weeks to go, and in my opinion, week 9 is the best week of them all, and unfortunately, with a couple of cancellations of week number 10, it's pretty much guaranteed to be the best week. So I'm very much looking forward to this one, and I am highly expecting to enjoy this card. There are very good prospects on this card, top to bottom. Every single fight I feel has at least one really good prospect that a lot of people are very high on, and it does of course include Artem Vakhitov in the main event, and it's just a great card. I really cannot wait for it. Of course, my article for this card was up last week, and I will be putting up another article at sometime this week for the week number 10 card that is to come next week. But so far, I feel like so good. I did go 4-1 on week 8 card, and I know a lot of people did end up picking DR and managed to sweep the card 5-0. But it is what it is. I feel like I went pretty good, 4-1, pretty good comeback, and I am hoping that we can get another perfect card before the end of the season. So with all of that being said, now let's get into my predictions for week number 9, which I think is going to be the best week of Dana White's Contender Series 2024. So the first fight of the card is going to be between two Australian flyweights, and Sean Gauci and Anthony Drillich, and I will actually be open and pretty transparent with this one. It's not really a pick that I want to make because I do actually have a relationship with both of these fighters. Typically, it's usually only with one, but in this case, it is with both, and I do think that they are both very talented fighters, and no matter what happens on this card, they're both going to end up in the UFC at one point. I am very, very sure of it. I will start by talking about Sean Gauci. I do feel like he is the more technical striker in this matchup. He does have very clean boxing, and he can mix up some wrestling if he needs to. In fact, in quite a few of his more recent fights, he actually has been mixing in some wrestling, and he especially did it in his matchup against Haewon Lee, which was a 5-round decision, which was pretty good to see. And then against Nobuyushi Nakatsukasa, he had to defend a lot of takedowns and ended up getting the knockout with that one. Sean Gauci, I would say he is mostly a boxer. I don't typically see too many kicks out of him, and I would say the best weapon that he does have on the feet is his overhand right, which he can land pretty regularly. He fights against Anthony Drillich, who I do think, we don't have the height and reach, but I do think he is going to be the smaller out of the two fighters, and Anthony Drillich is honestly probably one of the hardest hitting guys in this weight class. This guy has most recently really started to kind of pick up some power and really start to put his hands together, and he is finding a lot of success in the boxing, but I would actually say that in a lot of his previous fights, you actually do see quite a lot of wrestling, especially in his matchup against Jamie Ranalph. He actually spends the first 2 rounds attempting takedowns on Ranalph, but in the 3rd round, it looked like he got a little bit more tired, and Ranalph was able to take him down, and I thought that we did see Drillich win that fight. I thought he won the first 2 fights, but another thing about Drillich as well is this guy's been active. He's won, 5 fights, 6 fights in a row since 2022, and he's been on a bit of a streak, really, against Frank the Tank Jankowski. You watch this fight, he knocks down Frank the Tank multiple times, he defends takedowns against Frank the Tank multiple times, and just overall kind of dominates the fight, really. He does hurt him multiple times and gets a lot of control. Against Satoru Inomoto, in this fight, he actually had to defend a lot of takedowns, but that left hook was there, and he eventually did land it in that 2nd round. And then against Max Leali, it kind of was a little bit more of that same story. He actually knocked down Max Leali a couple of times before ending up finding that finish. For Anthony Drillich, his best weapon, I think, is that left hook. He definitely does kind of need to close the distance a lot more than Sean Gauci, I feel like, to have the most success in the striking in this fight. But I do think that if someone is going to find a finish, I actually would probably lean to the Drillich side, just because he actually does have some very serious power for this weight class. But I do just have a couple of things that I think that might favor Gauci in this matchup, is that Anthony Drillich, he either is all in or he's all out. He does kind of spend a lot of time on the outside, out of range of even like out of leg kick range, out of jab range, and he kind of has to kind of rush in to close the distance and land that left hook and land those short shots that he is pretty good at. And I feel like Sean Gauci with his boxing is going to be able to find jabs as he's coming in, and I think that's kind of going to be a little bit of the story of the fight. I think that Gauci will be able to dictate range in this one. I think that he is going to win a decision by doing that, and if he needs to, I think that he can go to wrestling and grappling, because he did do that against a pretty dangerous striker in Hei Wan Lee over 5 rounds. So that is my prediction. I do think that there is a pretty decent chance that Drillich can find the KO as well, but as I said, I do think that no matter who wins this fight, they're both going to end up in the UFC at one point. Gauci's minus 185. I think it's a bit wide. It is the closest fight on the card by far, and I do think it's a little bit wide, but I am going to be still picking Sean Gauci to win this fight by decision with pretty low confidence. And now we can move up. Islam Dulatov fights against Vanilto Antunes. Now, Islam Dulatov was meant to fight against Ming Ding. We saw how Ming Ding looked against Rami Hamed. Hindsight's 2020. Islam Dulatov would have absolutely smoked Ming Ding. I have very little doubt about that. And coming into this fight against Vanilto Antunes, I feel like Vanilto Antunes is a lesser fighter than Ming Ding. If you guys don't know who Islam Dulatov is, you probably do, maybe you don't. He is one of the most highly touted, most highly, I guess, respected and talked about prospects in welterweight outside of the UFC right now. He's listed at 6'6". In my opinion, I think he's probably 6'4", but nonetheless, he is a ridiculously tall welterweight. And it's funny because he doesn't really use that range all that well, because his style is very much come forward, pressure forward, and when he does get in close, he does have some nasty hooks, knees, and elbows, and those knees are really how he has been finding a lot of success recently against opponents. He does have 5 submission wins to go along with his 5 KO wins, but I wouldn't say that he's just kind of going out there and attempting takedowns. Now, the reason why I do think he isn't quite 6'6" is just because against John Pailagios, I believe Pailagios is 6'2", and Dulatov was taller than Pailagios for sure, but he wasn't like 6'6" tall compared against him. Dulatov's fun. He's a lot of fun, man. I do think actually in this matchup, he probably will be the better striker and definitely the better grappler. He fights against Vanilto Antunes. The tape for Antunes is just all over the place. I was able to watch a lot of older fights, and I was able to watch some more recent fights. Of course, you can see his fight against Gerardo Neto in that fight, and it honestly looked like Gerardo Neto gassed out 3 minutes into the fight. It was an odd one, I'll be honest, but Antunes just kind of dictated the pace on the feet and was able to find a lot of success by doing that. To my surprise, I couldn't find the Wendell Oliveira fight, which was a bit of a shame, but I was able to find quite a few other ones. The knockout loss to Sergey Romanov was just brutal. It really was a pretty bad one, and I was able to watch this fight against Jackson Velasco as well, and in that one, he attempts a lot of takedowns, which is odd, because from the limited tape, from what I was able to find on Vanilto Antunes, is that this guy just doesn't have much grappling, like, at all. He's got 4 submission losses, so on paper, it looks like he doesn't have good grappling. I go out there and I watch his fights. If anyone takes him down, he's got nothing off of his back. If he gets a takedown, it looks like he doesn't really have any way of getting a submission either. He's just an odd fighter to watch, and another thing that I actually have written down to mention is that he's listed at 5'11" in his LFA fight. If he's 5'11", Islam Dulatov is going to tower over this guy, and those knees are going to be there all day. I am expecting Dulatov to go out there. I think that this is going to be a first-round finish for Dulatov. I think it's a showcase fight for him, because if Dulatov looks good in this fight, I think the UFC can push this guy really, really far and really, really fast as well. Just as long as those visa issues don't come back, because that's why it was actually rescheduled, was because of visa issues on the Dulatov side. Minus 450 for Dulatov. I think he's going to close wider. I will be honest with you. I know these are wide odds already, but yeah, Dulatov, he's the man, really. And honestly, if Vanilto Antunes is going to win this one, he's going to have to knock out Islam Dulatov, and I just don't see that happening. I think that Dulatov can maintain range if he needs to, but I think he can also crash forward, and if he really wants to, he could shoot takedowns here and get the grappling going, because I just don't think that Antunes really has that much on the grappling side. But yes, talking about the KO loss that I very briefly mentioned as well, this fight, it's actually not that hard to find. You can see it on YouTube. I posted on multiple different sites and videos. Brutal KO. Brutal. So if you're in the mood for a brutal KO, watch that one. Another fight as well. I tried to find this fight against Luis Felipe Diaz. I thought it would be easy to find. Shooter Brazil 100. Suluev stretched loss. I couldn't find it. So if you guys have it, please send it to me. I'd appreciate that. But Dulatov is the pick. I think he finds a finish in the first round. I think it's more likely to be a knockout, but submission could be a very sneaky prop. But it looks like a lot of people are expecting the submission win on the Dulatov side. Now, Mario Pinto fights against Lucas Camacho. I am pretty confident in Mario Pinto here, but I do think that there is a couple of red flags to his game that I think maybe Lucas Camacho could exploit. Just looking at the odds, he's minus 500. That's wider than the Dulatov fight, even though I'm less confident in Pinto than I am Dulatov. Mario Pinto is a very talented heavyweight. This guy's good. This guy's a technical striker at heavyweight, and you don't usually see that great technique at this weight class, and I think that Mario Pinto can actually kind of bring a near like Cyril Gane kind of style. He does do very well with the leg kicks and the body kicks. That's how he's actually been able to slow down and stop a lot more of his recent opponents, especially the most recent opponent in Kasim Araz. If you guys don't know who Kasim Araz is, he is a former Bellator fighter for quite a few times for their promotion, and he's just like a big boy. Like, he's an absolute boulder of a man. And honestly, within the first couple of rounds, Mario Pinto had landed so many leg kicks on him that Araz was really kind of starting to struggle there. On the feet though, Pinto's 6'5". He's a tall guy. He's a very athletic heavyweight as well. He does have great movement side to side, but he does get pushed backwards easily. I don't think that this guy really is, or currently has, the kind of style to dictate the pace and pressure his opponents backwards. In all of the fights that I saw out of him, even against Benjamin Sahik, who's just a terrible striker, Sahik was finding success, quite a bit of success actually, by pressuring forwards against Mario Pinto, especially early on. But then Sahik gassed out, had absolutely nothing left, and Pinto was able to finish off the corpse of Benjamin Sahik. But he can be pressured back very easily, and that's kind of like the only thing that I think that Lucas Camacho can really bring as a threat to Pinto. Lucas Camacho took a big break from the MMA. I actually don't know for sure why that is, but he returned to LFA and took on a really fat Muay Thai guy in Carlos Sena. Sorry, that was just really blatant, but that just kind of is what it was. And he gassed out really badly. Maybe it wasn't Carlos Sena. Maybe I'm giving him some strays. I think, yes, it was Carlos Sena for sure, who gassed out really badly in the first round. But anyway, Lucas Camacho, his whole fighting style is like he just rushes forward and pushes forward a lot. Like, he holds his hands and like his stance, like his defensive stance, not by his chin, not a little bit lower like some MMA fighters typically do. His hands are like here. And like when he's throwing his strikes, he's rushing forward and he's like throwing from the hips, with his chin way up in the air like this, just rushing forward. And then even sometimes, like if he wants to land a counter strike, because his hands are here, he like throws like downwards like this. It's just a very awkward sort of style. It doesn't really make that much sense. He's not the most technical striker in the world, but what he does do is just rush forward and pressure forward, man. And as I said, Mario Pinto, he can get pushed backwards pretty easily. I mean, everyone's been able to pressure forwards against him so far, and I don't think that Lucas Camacho is really going to be any different, because he is just a blitzing forward, combination throwing, forward moving heavyweight. But I think that Mario Pinto, he's just too good. You know, I think he's too technical in this matchup. I would be very surprised if at some point in the fight he just doesn't snipe Camacho with a straight right hand as he's rushing forwards and catches him in that way. I like Pinto in this matchup because he is just more technical. However, as I did say, there is some red flags and maybe some sort of weaknesses that Camacho can exploit because he does just rush forward so much. But I think he's too hittable. He does have a decent gas tank. Like, he was able to outlast both of his opponents in the LFA since he took that 4-year break. But Pinto's fought like very long fights. I almost want to say he's fought multiple 5-round fights. Now, the fight against Kasim Araz was 5 rounds, but was the fight against Marino Kakapor 5 rounds, which was a same day tournament? I don't think it was. It wasn't. It was 3 3-minute rounds. I did not think it was. But nonetheless, Mario Pinto fought a same-day tournament for Level Fight League, the same promotion that Yusri Balgari's been fighting for, and now I think he's going to make his way into the UFC by defeating Lucas Camacho on the feet. I'm just going to pick him by knockout. He doesn't look like he hits that hard, but I do think that he's just going to land on Camacho as he's rushing forwards. Now we have Cody Steele fighting against Chasen Blair. Cody Steele, of course, was meant to fight against Carmel Atoni on what I believe was Contender Series Week 4. Carmel Atoni literally pulled out the night of the fight And that's just a little bit of a shame. But fortunately for Cody Steele, he has got a replacement opponent here in Chasen Blair, and he's going to have to also somewhat unfortunately have to cut weight twice in that short period of time. And that can be pretty difficult. We've seen that happen in the past with Chris Duncan when he fought against Vyacheslav Borchev after having quite a few fights pull out. He went out there, got knocked out like by Vyacheslav pretty easily. The double weight cuts, they affect fighters, man. They really do. And hopefully that doesn't happen to Cody Steele, because I do think that this guy is a pretty legitimate talent. Now, Cody Steele, in his career, has mostly just been a wrestler grappler. On the feet, I would say that his striking has been one of his biggest weaknesses, but he has very rapidly developed some pretty nice hands, I have to be honest with you. Because if you do, I don't know how to use Tapology, if you do watch his fights so far, even against Nicholas Whitehead, even though he knocked him out in the first round, Nicholas Whitehead did land on him on the feet a couple of times, and even Nico Echeverri was able to counter a couple of his shots because he mostly was just relying on closing the distance with hooks to get the takedowns. But if you go out there and you watch his fight against Alejandro Martinez, he wins that fight with the boxing for the most part. Now, he is attempting takedowns against Martinez and he's not really getting them, but it's because he's just boxing him up on the feet. And I was very, very impressed by the improvement that he had made in such a short period of time in the boxing. And I actually do believe, because of that improvement that he has made, Cody Steele is going to be the better striker in this matchup against Chasen Blair. Now, Chasen Blair is listed at 5'10", which makes him a pretty tall lightweight, but not really. But he's kind of interesting because he's got a very slim build. So he's a very slim 5'10" for the weight class, and Cody Steele listed at 5'9". I think he's got like a lot more, I guess, like width to him, a lot more muscle to him. Chasen Blair is definitely a grappler. He kind of has an interesting sort of story because I believe he was born in the US and then he actually moved to, I believe, Liverpool. And he trains in Liverpool, and that's why actually if you watch him, he has actually fought on a few of the Cage Warriors cards in both the USA and also in Europe as well in a couple of those fights. I believe his fights in the most two recent fights have been the ones in Europe, and the fight against Orlando Sanders took place in the US, so he had one in England, and the fight against Sanders, of course, took place in the US. Chasen Blair, though, he's a grappler. He does have an opponent on his record that you probably do recognize in Ahmad Hassanzada, and in that fight, Hassanzada did kind of pull a knee bar out of absolutely nowhere, and aside from that, his grappling is very good. Now, he does have a lot of first-run finishes because his grappling is very good. He does, on the feet, not really have the best defense, I don't think. I think he's pretty upright, and he just kind of like is very hittable. He can be countered, but he's not wanting the fight to be on the feet. He shoots for takedowns, and he shoots for takedowns pretty regularly, and once he gets that fight down to the ground, you really can see the skill set and the grappling that he does possess. But I like Steele in this matchup because Steele does have very good wrestling from what I've seen. I know that he also has that grappling background as well, and a lot of people talk about his grappling, but for the most part, recently, he's been winning a lot of those fights with his hands, and I think he's really developed that boxing a lot more. And I think that this fight's going to take place on the feet. I feel like Cody Steele might choose not to shoot takedowns on Chasen Blair. And Chasen Blair, I don't necessarily think is going to be able to get the takedowns. So it's going to come down to striking. And I think that Cody Steele is actually the much better striker in the fight, which is why I am going to side with him here. This is kind of like a medium confidence pick, I would say. It's not low confidence, but it's not high confidence. I'm going to go with Steele. I'm going to go with Steele by knockout. And it's short notice for both, technically. But I think it's more so short notice for Chasen Blair, and I do think that Steele can go up there. He's minus 240 right now. Maybe a little bit wide, maybe not. I don't know. I guess we'll have to see on the night how the lines close. And now we've got the main event. Artem Vakhitov taking on Islem Masref, as I did kind of hint to at the start of the video. One of my best friends is going to be fighting on this card. Unfortunately, he's not one of my best friends, but I do wish he was. Artem Vakhitov, you guys probably know who he is. You know, you look at him, he's 2-1 in MMA. What's he doing on the Contender Series? He fought Alex Pereira and was the most recent fighter to actually defeat Alex Pereira in kickboxing. Now, he actually fought him a couple of times. You could argue that he beat Alex Pereira the first time and then lost the second time. It was a couple of interesting decisions in there. But in those fights against Pereira, they were pretty recent. We're talking about training full-time in pure kickboxing in 2021, which is what's that, 3 years ago now? So he's actually not too far removed from the heights of being the best kickboxer there is in Glory Kickboxing. And I guess you could make the argument the best kickboxer in the world. Now, he has probably seen the fact that Alex Pereira has found so much success in MMA and thought that he can do the same. And unfortunately for him, man, he just started off with a really bad injury. I personally wasn't able to see the video. I know a lot of people have. I tried to find it. There was a Reddit link that linked to it, and I couldn't see it, but I have seen videos of people talking about it, and I've seen photos of it too. And in this situation, Artem Vakhitov, to my understanding, was in full mount and was landing ground and pound and dislocated his elbow in full mount. So that was a really, really unfortunate situation. Then you go and watch his next fight against Siavush Salikov. Definitely, this guy Salikov didn't think he had a chance of winning. He shot, I guess, like half. What's the terminology that's going to be like PG, and Angelo's not going to be upset. He shot for takedowns that I don't think he expected to get, and Vakhitov just kind of shook him off, and eventually just kind of shook him off and pushed him to the ground, took him out, and then finished him off there. And then against Kambiev, he just kicked him multiple times to the legs. In fact, the first kick that he landed, it looked like Kambiev just wanted to quit, and he actually did quit, unfortunately, for Kambiev. So in MMA, not much. In kickboxing, a lot. And I will be honest with you guys, I know that you probably do see the fact that he's beaten Pereira in kickboxing recently, and you think that he might go out there and do the same as Alex Pereira. I don't actually necessarily think that his kickboxing style is going to translate to MMA instantly as well as Alex Pereira's did, because Alex Pereira, he is a somewhat low volume guy, but he has a lot of power, and he can fight from range a bit, which is pretty good, because if someone wants to take him down, they have to close the distance to shoot for that takedown. Artem Vakhitov is kind of the opposite. He actually fights in close range a lot, and he initiated clinches a lot in Glory Kickboxing. And I think that in MMA, if he goes out there and he initiates clinches against a lot of these grapplers or wrestlers, they might be able to just use that as an opportunity to maybe even use some judo on him and take him down in that sort of way. So yeah, I do worry about that a little bit, but the way that he mostly strikes is leg kicks is a big game of his kickboxing style. And he does have very good counterboxing as well. But he wants to close the distance. He wants to throw combinations in close range. And he's got very fast hands. And when he gets close, he does let those hands go. His defense is good. I mean, Alex Pereira was landing a lot on him in those recent fights. But you can't take away the fact that Vakhitov was able to hurt Alex Pereira more than once, actually, in those kickboxing matchups. So despite not getting that many KOs on the kickboxing scene, and I guess just so far 2 KOs against not great competition, he's good. He's got the power, and I think that he actually can defeat Islem Masref here, but he's minus 800. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't, because if I look at this fight, and if I'm not mistaken, this fight was originally booked at 205 pounds. Very recently, and I want to say in the last 7 days, that has now been moved to 265 pounds. And I can tell you, that is not because of Artem Vakhitov. I think Artem Vakhitov could maybe make 185. It's because of this boy here, Islem Masref, the man that obviously decided he couldn't make 205. He weighed in at 260 pounds in the last recorded Tapology matchup, and I believe it probably was this PFL Europe card, which if you do watch, his opponent, Mikhail Grahu, literally walks forward with his hands down, and he's like doing this, you've probably seen it, went pretty viral, and he just kicks him in the head and knocks him out. That's kind of it. So I thought, oh well, there's nothing to come from there. Let's watch his other fights. Against Mateo Gondin, showed a couple of good takedown defenses, but mostly just beat him up on the feet. Was not a very technical striker. It kind of was pretty sloppy. But I think his best fight to watch in regards to maybe seeing him potentially wrestle is his debut against Azamat Abukunov. Now, to be fair, he's just defending takedowns the entire time, and he does pull guillotine more than once as well. He does it in the first round and then gets it in the second, but he's just defending takedowns the whole time. He never attempts an offensive takedown unless it's kind of like an opportunity that he can take from his opponent, kind of making a mistake in the wrestling. But if you want to see any wrestling out of Masref, you have to see it defensively in his professional debut. Now, just because I've never seen him attempt a takedown so far in MMA, doesn't mean that he's not going to do it, because I think he is going to, because this fight is at heavyweight, and being at heavyweight heavily favors Masref, because if he is going to weigh in at 260 pounds again, he's going to be so much bigger than Artem, man. I know that Artem's a 6'1" guy, 205 pounds. I don't think he's that big at light heavyweight, and he is going to have a big size disadvantage against Islem Masref. But I do think as long as the fight is on the feet, Vakhitov is just going to be too good for him, to be honest. I think that Vakhitov is just going to be too good at striking for Masref to be able to capitalize on the feet. But if Masref goes out there and just decides to clinch against Vakhitov and hold him up against the cage because he's going to be 260 pounds and take him down, and we haven't seen Vakhitov's takedown defense against anyone good. So I don't know if it's going to be good enough to deal with Masref. I'm going to pick Vakhitov to win. It's a medium confidence pick. I'm picking Vakhitov to win by KO in the first round. But I do want to say, I mean, minus 800 is insanity to me. It is, especially if the fight's at 265 pounds. Masref could use that size advantage to maybe make something happen with some wrestling. But I think that Vakhitov's going to get it done. I think he's going to be a lot faster than Masref. I think on the feet, just in close range, he's going to land so many more boxing combinations. That's what he does. So I like Vakhitov. I do think he wins this one. I'm interested to see what happens after this. I think he is going to fight at 205. But I wouldn't mind his chances at 185. I really wouldn't. I think that it would be quite fun. And eventually seeing Vakhitov... Oh, no. I was going to say, seeing Vakhitov versus Cesar Almeida could be quite fun. But they might be training together. But I'm not 100% on that. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I think this is going to be the best card of all of them. I'm really looking forward to this one. So with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one.